We will begin shortly. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session. We will begin the session shortly. Yes, this is going to be an interactive session, and we are looking forward to your participation. Just hold on for some time and we'll begin the session. We will begin at 6 p.m. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. Jiyo Parsi team is glad to have you on our Friday forum. Most of you know me as Pearl Mystery, counselor working with Jiyo Parsi since last 6 years, also a mother of three wonderful children. Starting as a community program for the Parsis, under the Ministry of Minority Affairs, Jiyo Parsi has become a universal program for creating a work-life balance. Like the Parsis, the world today faces issues of globalization. We all need our voices heard in the seemingly uncaring silence. We need advice on relationships, loneliness, health, and well being, and above all, psychological, practical, and moral support. The online platform we are offering covers everything from children to culture. We look forward to your participation and suggestions. We are all together in this new world. Let us become a global online family with trained professionals and experienced individuals with us. Our speaker for today is Mrs. Jayshree Mehta. She is a life skills trainer, over 2 decades experience in conducting workshops for parents, teachers, and adolescents. Her workshops help them to navigate through their individual challenges. She will be discussing an interesting topic today: emotions are friends or foes. Nothing at this point of time is more important than our well being, and emotional health is an integral part of that. And this is an interactive session, so we are looking forward to a lot of questions, lot of comments from your side. So kindly leave your questions and comments in the chat box. Once the session is over, the last 20 minutes will be handling all your questions. Yeah, thank you, and help me welcome Jayshree.
Thank you. Thank you, Pearl, for those lovely words. And a very good evening to all my dear participants and attendees who are here with me. At the outset, I would like to first thank Geo Parsi, an esteemed organization, for offering this platform to me to share my views on a topic which is very close to my heart. Not just the last 3 months, but otherwise also. Life's vagaries and challenges do not end. We cannot wish them away. But what we can do is find tools to navigate these challenges. One of the tools which I have practiced and over the last few years understood and practiced is emotional intelligence. And I have found it very beneficial to improve the everyday texture of life. And I think that's what we all are looking for. Hence, welcome to this session. Before I continue, I would like to say to keep it interactive and not one sided, I will be putting forth questions which require very simple and quick answers, maybe a yes or no, or maybe a true and false. I request you, and I'd be grateful if you could all participate and type your answers in the chat box, and Pearl will then manage that. And we will have a short discussion on that. So, to begin with, next, please. Yeah, next. Yes. Let's get going. And next slide, please. Yes. So I thought that before we get into the concept into with more depth, let me do a short quiz about ourselves, because I have also understood and observed that all of us here today are playing multiple roles multiple times, from being a mother to a daughter in law to a mother in law to a grandmother to a teacher to a counselor to a professional, I'm sorry, to maybe a nurse, maybe a domestic help in such times. We are playing umpteen roles to a friend. And so we are always constantly playing roles. And who's doing that? Me, I. At the center of all this is me. So we seem to have time and have to find time for every other role except the one which is most important, and that is me. So today's session is more to know you about you. So this little quiz is just to set the mood in motion and just to get forward. I am going to, as you can see on your screens, but I shall also read them out. These are statements. These statements do not have any right or wrong answers, and your answers will not be shared either. All I want you to do is that as I read out a statement, if you agree with it, you can just mentally keep a count. And as many affirmatives you have, as many yeses you have, if you could just type it in the chat box. If three sentences you agree with, then you just need to chat three or two or whatever is your response. So let's begin with the first with this little short quiz. And the first sentence is, I avoid speaking about uncomfortable and touchy issues. I avoid speaking about uncomfortable and touchy issues. Number two, I feel guilty if I put my needs before others. Number three, I hesitate to share my feelings. I hesitate to share my feelings. Lately, am I smiling less? So I would like it and request you to just in the chat box type in your answers, that how many of these statements agree with you. This is just a little peek into what we already know a little about ourselves. Because the thing is, we do know few things about ourselves, but beyond that, we are a little clueless at times. We don't know how to deal with these feelings. We don't know how to deal with these states that we are in and these things that we know about ourselves. Hence, what do? We these kind of uncomfortable feelings about ourselves, we try to push them under the carpet or ignore them or hide them or maybe disguise them. And we all do it because we don't know how else to deal with them, and they are undoubtedly uncomfortable. So in that case, I hope by the end of the session you find some tools on how to dealing with these kind of emotions. So if the response is there, Pearl, should I wait for a minute?
Yes, Jayshree. The most common response is two.
Two.
Two
So
of them. Yeah.
two of them. Are there any three or four?
Very few. Very few.
Okay, that's nice. That's very nice to know that at least there are some statements that you relate to. So, getting on with this, uh, next slide, please. Yes. Let me first give you a little background about what is emotional intelligence. So, this is a relatively new concept which was developed in 1990 by a couple of very well known psychologists, but it remained in the annals of academics and it was part of the psychology literature. However, it was later, much later, that in Daniel Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence, popularized this concept. Till 1990, IQ was the byword. We all understood it to be the best attribute to gauge our competence, to measure our success rate, depending on our competence. And this was used widely everywhere, especially institutions, even organizations, etc. However, through research, it was observed that people, even with high IQ, were unable and were not able to perform professionally and also had glitches personally. So, in both the lives, there were glitches, and even the academically well placed learners were unable to meet professionally the professional demands. That's when EQ started being noticed, and I think I can safely say that EQ today is the new IQ. And EQ has become a byword from the biggest organizations to institutions to families to individuals. Hence, emotional quotient, which is the measure of emotional intelligence, is what we are here together to talk about and understand this new tool. Next slide, please. So before we get on to what exactly is emotional intelligence, I would like to first put forth a couple of questions on what is and deconstruct this term, that what is not emotional intelligence. So let's just deconstruct this term a little more. Let's go to intelligence. Now, that is a term that we are all very familiar with. What is intelligence? Basically, intelligence means understanding, a grasp. We all are intelligent in some fields because our grasp is good there and we get it fast. Similarly, there are certain fields where we are not so intelligent, where we take longer to grasp. So, intelligence is something that we are all very familiar with. But what is emotional intelligence? So, I'm going to put forth a question and wait for a moment while you can type in your answers. I would like to know that the statement I make, if do you think it's true or false? I repeat, I will make a statement and you have to type in true or false. Let's begin with the first one. Emotional intelligence means suppressing and controlling our uncomfortable emotions. I repeat statement one. Emotional intelligence means suppressing or controlling our uncomfortable emotions. I'll wait for a moment while Pearl can just check the chat box. So, Pearl, any responses coming? Should I move on to the second one? Pearl, have you got any responses there? Matab, can you unmute her? Hello? I mean, sorry. Hi. I can't hear you, Matab.
Yes, yeah, there are actually a lot of lot of falses.
Lot of
Wow,
falses.
wow, yeah, that is yeah, there are
That's really
many.
an eye opener. That's wonderful, which means we already have a very discerning audience. So,
Yeah,
emotional intelligence means suppressing or controlling our uncomfortable emotions. And there are more truths or false?
Yeah, maximum are false, very few are true.
True. Okay. Statement two. Emotional emotional people are better equipped to be emotionally intelligent. I repeat, emotional people are better equipped to be emotionally intelligent.
Waiting for the responses.
Yeah.
Yeah, most people are saying that emotional people are better equipped to be emotionally intelligent.
All
But
right,
not
thank you.
few are also saying not necessary.
I see. Okay, but dominantly the answer has been true. Yes. Okay, thank you. So before
Yeah.
I get into the third statement, let me just have a short discussion here. What is being emotional and what is emotional intelligence? Well, the answer is false, no doubt. Being emotional is different from being emotionally intelligent. Being emotional, how do I explain it? All right, let me put forth quick questions to you. Have you ever cried in a movie? Have you ever gone above and beyond for your friends? Have you often been called very affectionate, very loving, very helpful? In that case, you are more emotional than average. Emotional people are people who have big emotions, who who feel, and who more frequently they also, the depth of their emotion is far more, and they are more, they can feel the emotions more. What it also means is that choices, that decision making gets deeply influenced by their emotions. So that is why an emotional person is a person who is more in control, more controlled, I would rather say, by his emotions. Emotional intelligence is not that. Now, let me go to the third and final statement. Emotionally intelligent people are people who have more positive emotions. True or false? I think I'll just repeat that. Emotionally intelligent people have more positive emotions. True or false?
Yeah, waiting for the responses.
Yes.
I had a few which said not really.
Okay.
Some are saying true.
Yeah. Okay.
The mixed
So there are
response. Some
some.
are saying not really and some are saying yes. Now the
Yes.
majority ones are saying yes. A few said false.
Okay. So the majority is saying yes. That
I would
yes.
say yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
majority
So the,
saying.
yeah, the majority. So this again. So well, the response, the answers to all three is actually false. First one, emotional intelligence means not suppressing our uncomfortable emotions. Number two, as I've already explained, being emotional is quite different from being emotionally intelligent. And number three, emotionally intelligent people do not really have more positive emotions. They just know how to manage their so called negative, or what we call negative in everyday parlance, or uncomfortable emotions. They are able to manage them better. I hope this gives you a little more clearer picture on what is emotional intelligence. And as the next slide tells us, emotional intelligence has two major aspects. I have simplified the whole PPT because I think what we really want is just the main crux of the theory, and not the finer details. So basically, emotional intelligence has two aspects. One is about the self, and one is about the others. Emotional intelligence means understanding yourself first. Often we do the opposite. We try and figure out others. We try and, judge others. We try and label others' emotions and try and understand them, or at least judge them or comment on them. What, what EQ says is first understand yourself. So, understanding yourself is the first part of emotional intelligence, and that is what we are going to discuss in a little more detail through this presentation and through this session. So, moving on to the next slide. When I'm speaking about self, the important part about self is self awareness. Now, self awareness is actually self explanatory. We all know the meaning of what is it being to be self aware. As you can very well see in this slide, self awareness, one part of it is, do I have pimples or wrinkles or freckles? And that's easier to understand and easy to share also. So that is the periphery, that is the upper layer of self-awareness, where we already know a few things that we are comfortable about. But if we could go a little more deeper, what exactly is self awareness and how can I become more self aware? I'm going to discuss that, and that will be an important tool of emotional intelligence. So, now, once again, I will be requesting you to respond in the chat boxes to the various situations that I'm going to discuss, relatable everyday situations that I'm going to discuss now. So, up till now, we have covered on what is emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is a relatively new concept, just about 3 decades old. Emotional intelligence is gradually increased in importance and need, and it is also, if not displacing, I would say almost at par with IQ as an attribute for mental and physical well-being. Emotional intelligence, what is it not? I just went a bit into that. It is about not being emotional, it is about not suppressing your emotions, and it is about managing even your uncomfortable emotions better. Now we move on to the first. Emotional intelligence has two parts to it. Self awareness is the first part, and I'm going to go a little more into that. To understand this better, we are going to again have a little, we are going to have a little exercise again. So I'm going to describe a situation. I'd be very grateful if you could type in any one feeling. How do you feel in this situation? So one or two answers would be wonderful and most welcome. How do you feel? I wouldn't like you to write general answers like depends, but something specific. How do you feel? So, so can we move to the next slide? Yeah. So the last 3 months have definitely been unprecedented. None of us in our lifetimes have ever experienced that. So I request you all to type in your chat boxes, what is the dominant emotion that you have experienced? What is the dominant emotion that you have experienced?
Yes, waiting for responses.
Just I'd like to repeat, since the pandemic, what have you been going through? Could you just type in one or two names of emotions?
Yeah, few are saying confused, anxious, worried, overwhelmed, and later acceptance.
Yes, thank you. I think we'll just wait for a moment or two more.
Yeah, yeah. Uncertain, helpless, mixed emotions, relaxed, tired but happy, irritated,
Joe.
feeling of loss, gratitude. Jayshree ma'am, gratitude and appreciation have also come up.
Wonderful.
Relaxed and bonding with family, confused.
Fine. Those are a wide spectrum of emotions. Thank you so much, Pearl.
Yeah.
So I think we can. Um, I would just like to draw attention of my viewers that the responses have been as wide as tired, overwhelmed, confused, anxious, to relaxed, to gratitude, a very unusual and beautiful emotion, to appreciate, and of course to loss and helpless. Now we go on to the next situation. You are rushing for an important meeting and you get stuck in a traffic snarl. You are rushing for an important meeting and you get stuck in a traffic snarl. What is the dominant emotion? What is the emotion you experience?
Yeah, waiting for responses. Yeah, frustration, anxiety, relaxed but sometimes frustrated, impatient, again helpless,
Thank you. Those are some wonderful responses again. Any more coming?
mainly anxious and anxiety,
All right.
frustration,
Yeah.
anger.
Anger, frustration. Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah,
Pearl, once again.
yeah.
And now we go for the third and the final situation. So, the next slide, please. You are often teased for this, possibly a habit or a physical attribute. A common one at my age would be weight, but it could be just anything, any attribute, um, any habit, even a lisp, even it could be anything, and you're teased about it. How do you feel then?
Waiting for responses. Yeah, annoyed. Could you repeat the question once, Jayshree ma'am?
Sure.
The
You
third
are,
one?
yeah, you are often teased. You are often teased about something. It could be a physical attribute, or it could be a habit, or it could be just anything, but you're teased about it.
Right, right. Lots of responses now coming in. Angry, shamed, ashamed, irritated, does not affect, helpless, hurt, laugh it off, sometimes, contempt for the other person, unaffected,
Those
tend to
again are
laugh at myself, doesn't bother me, avoid the situation or the person, hurt. Yeah, that's it.
thank you.
Hurt and
So,
cry,
so yeah,
some
thank
cry.
you. Cry. Oh, nice,
Yeah,
nice. Interesting. Thank you, Pearl. And I also just wanted to quickly jot because this is just such a fantastic spectrum of emotions that we are seeing before us. So, as you have mentioned,
right.
just going back, the emotions for each situation bordered from very unhappy to happy. Taking the last situation about being teased, from being unaffected, couldn't care less, laughing it off, to contempt, to revengeful, to getting very angry, frustrated, to something like shame or humiliated or embarrassed or maybe even conscious. So, as you can see, each of these situations have generated varied responses. So, with that, I end this exercise. And I would now like to take forward that the learning from this exercise. I hope you all enjoyed it and thank you for being so participative. So, two very important learnings from this. The first one, as you would have noticed, the same situation has elicited different responses from being relaxed during a lockdown and relaxed and actually gratitude, feeling gratitude, to, of course, feeling confused and helpless. Similarly, in the second situation of the traffic snarl, feeling helpless and impatient and angry to even relaxed. And the third situation being annoyed and to being not bothered and laughing it off. This is really a deep learning out there that the same situation elicits different responses from people. So, why does this happen? Because each, and before I go into that, I'd like to ask you that who is correct? The one who feels relaxed, is she right? Or the one who feels confused, is she right? Or he right? The one who feels angry, is that person right in feeling angry? Or the person who's laughing it off, is she right? So I'm sure you've all guessed it. There are no rights and wrongs. Each one of us are entitled to feel our emotions, and each one of us have a right to our emotions, These are emotions we feel. There are no rights and wrongs. They are my truths. And each one of us feel in a certain way depending on just three factors. One, our personality, B, our experiences, and C, our beliefs, which get formed early on in age, which means it depends on our upbringing also. So the three factors get together and lead to such responses. Hence, nobody is right or wrong, which takes me to the next step, that we therefore acceptance becomes a very powerful word of emotional intelligence. Accepting people. You might not agree with them, you might not agree with their response, but their response is their response because of what they feel and what their experiences are. That is a very important aspect of self awareness. And the second thing, which is a very important learning and which takes me deeper into emotional intelligence, is that naming and identifying emotions is one of the most powerful techniques of making inroads into emotional intelligence and self awareness. As you would have noticed, we have like a whole list of words which describe emotions. And this is actually a small list. There are like thousands of words. So, naming and identifying emotions. May I get the next slide? Naming and identifying emotions. Can I get the next one? And then we'll come back to this. Yeah. So, naming and identifying emotions is the first step towards self awareness, which is an important part of emotional, the integral part of emotional intelligence. Why is it so important? Because, and what do I need for naming? Number one, like it's for any other language, the better the vocabulary, the better we can explain ourselves. So the more words I am good at, even in any language, let's say English, I'll be able to explain myself better, I'll be clearer, and I'll be better understood. The same holds true for emotional vocabulary. Unfortunately, among all the jargon that we are taught since childhood, from reptiles and mammals to planet system, etc., this is one vocabulary that we haven't been taught as such. And that is the emotion vocabulary or emotional literacy. Because research has told us that the finer we are able, the more precisely we are able to name our emotions, the better we feel, the more liberating it is. Research has also shown that naming of emotions, I want to repeat, naming of emotions reduces the intensity of emotions. The rawness of emotion is taken care of, and a little calming happens when I name my emotion. When I name my emotion, I also know what I'm feeling. It makes me feel better. And most importantly, a lot of times I have never even come face to face with my emotions. As I had mentioned before, we are very uncomfortable with our emotions a lot of times. But when I name it, I'm also accepting that I have that emotion. So, acceptance of my emotions, which my upbringing or my beliefs tell me is a negative emotion, is very important. And why do I need this acceptance? Because since our childhood, we have been taught that negative emotions are bad. And what are negative emotions? Jealousy, anger, hate. Immediately, if I ask you to categorize them, I'm sure you'll say, yes, these are negative emotions. So, a simple example, like you come home from school, if you remember your school days, and you would tell your mom that, Mom, I don't like my maths teacher. And I'm sure her first reaction would have been, we never say bad to teachers. But Mama, she is like that. No, I do not want to hear anything. Maybe you must have bugged her, irritated her. It must have been your mistake. So the child understands that this is something that is not acceptable. So the child refuses, then gradually learns to not express it. But does it mean I stop feeling it? No, I don't. Sometimes we are able to manage these emotions, a lot of times we are not. So, therefore, naming emotions helps me understand what I am feeling and classifying them. When I accept negative emotions and positive emotions, I'm more in tune with myself and more, what should I say, internally secure. And the third and last thing that naming helps us in doing is taking responsibility of our emotions. A lot of times we feel, I don't want to get angry. I also don't like it, but you make me angry or she makes me angry. I have this helpless victim feeling. The more I continue being in this helpless victim feel, the less I can take charge of myself, the less I'll be able to do something about my emotions. But the more I take responsibility of my emotions, that yes, I was feeling upset, yes, I feel left out, yes, I feel devalued, yes, I feel annoyed, the more responsibility I take, the more clarity, the more liberating, and the more in control I am. Then of course it the next question becomes, what do I do with this emotion? I have various options. If I'm comfortable the way I am, I don't need to do anything. But if my emotion is overwhelming me, if my emotion is clouding my judgment, if my emotion is affecting my moods, then it's up to me what I do about it. But till I don't take a call, nobody else can help me. So that was a very important step towards emotional intelligence, and that is emotional literacy, naming and identifying emotions. I hope you enjoyed this activity. Mahtab, may I ask you to just take me one back, the slide that I missed? Yes. So, perception, this is the other powerful learning from this exercise, that while one chooses to be angry, another chooses to be cool about it. Hence, who is right and who is wrong? Nobody is right or wrong. We all have our reasons. It is how I perceive things. Let me share a short story with you. So, there was a shoe company years and years back, decades ago. They wanted to explore newer markets and decided to send two teams to explore the shoe market in deep into Africa. Both the teams did a recce and came back and submitted their reports. While one team said nobody wears shoes there, zero opportunity. The other team said nobody wears shoes there, 100% potential. So who's right and who's wrong? It is just the way you look at it. As this slide very clearly, it is self-explanatory. Whether it is a 6 or 9, we can endlessly fight about it. But in the final analysis, it is my perception based on my, like I said, beliefs and experiences that matters. Whether my perception is right or wrong is another story. But right now, we are sticking to how perceptions matter and how each one of us has a right to our own perceptions. And our perceptions determine my decisions, my choices, my actions, and my behavior. And therefore determines my life choices also. So I hope you found this little interaction interesting, and I hope you're also writing in questions in the chat box. And if we could move to the next slide, Mehta, and the next one. Yes. So, no, the last one. Yeah. So this is another picture that I found very interesting and very evocative. It speaks a lot. So one last time, I'm making you do a lot of work. I'm sorry, but can you just type in that when you see this picture, what do you think the butterfly is feeling? What do you think the butterfly is feeling? Can you please type in these answers in the chat box? What is the butterfly feeling? So are we getting some answers, Pearl? Mata?
Yes,
Matab, can you unmute?
yes. A lot are saying synonyms of freedom: freedom, liberated, feeling free, relief, happy to be free. Yes, a lot of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Lot of that. So that's exactly the feeling you will feel once you start naming and identifying your emotions. Liberated. A lot of things that have just got layers on them, gradually and slowly as you unlayer yourself, believe me, my dear friends, it is an exercise which takes time, and practice is the only solution. You cannot get overnight solutions, but at least if you can, go on to this path, believe me, that's exactly the feeling you will get. A lot of relief, a lot of clarity, freedom to choose next what I have to do. So, with that, we move to the next slide. So, like I mentioned earlier, why is it important to know our emotions? And why is it important to have precision in emotions? You have all experienced anger, I'm sure, without a doubt. We all, why should I exclude myself? We all have experienced anger at some point in time. But we have all been angry for different reasons. So I have been calling my client at least 10 times and he just doesn't answer. Frustration leading to anger. This is the third attempt I have made at clearing the exam. I have not been successful. Lot of disappointment leading to anger. Lot of frustration. Um, Everybody my boss ticked me off quite badly in front of my colleagues for no fault of mine. I felt hurt, I felt humiliated, and that transforms into anger. So, as you would have seen, anxiety, what's going to happen now? I just don't know what I'm going to do if this continues. This kind of anxiety and worry again leads to anger. So the overt emotion is anger. What we see is anger, what we see is irritation, but actually there are a lot of underlying emotions that lead to this uh, emotion of anger. So if I know, am I feeling devalued? Am I feeling disrespected or humiliated? There are some vulnerable emotions, some aggressive emotions, and some hurt emotions. But emotions, they tell me that just like an iceberg, most of it is cannot be seen, and only a bit, 10% is visible above water. The same way our emotions sometimes over years just get piled up and we're unable to see. Helplessness. So I'm sure we can relate to these emotions. And another very important one, hungry. Being hungry or tired, yes, are they seem so everyday, but they can be major triggers for anger. So this was just to show you that how the emotion that is evident, because you might be thinking there, now come on, we know our emotions. What's the big deal about it? So we do know our main emotions like anger or fear or sad or happy, but there's a lot more going below which we are unable to decipher, and where the emotion vocabulary and the naming activity will help you. So whenever you are feeling overwhelmed by your emotions, do this, my dear friends. Take a pause. Take a pause. Think about it. Sit down and just go over in your analyze a bit. And I'm telling you, you will figure out which is the emotion that is. These are which is bothering you. These are hidden emotions. This is not the big emotion, but they're still important emotions. So let's move to the next slide. So, self awareness, I was talking about how our emotions tell us about ourselves. Well, research has shown another very interesting phenomenon which we all have experienced but have not been mindful about, and that is the physiological changes that are associated with emotions. So, I'm sure we have experienced these. For example, when we are anxious or when we are worried, we feel sweaty palms. Or when we are angry, yes, there is a surge of energy and our cheeks go red, or our eyes start glowing, or we experience breathlessness or drying of mouth. So these are changes. When you're happy, there's so much more energy. You speak more loudly. You laugh much more. So our body also gives us signals. So if I'm aware of the signals that my body is giving me, and if I'm aware of that my emotion and my body signals match together, I can be more aware, and I can get this message that now I can feel there's some butterflies in my stomach, something I need to relax because I am getting nervous, I am getting anxious. And what can help is if you can breathe. Breathing universally is now accepted as one of the most effective quick fix solutions to managing our emotions. So, just breathing 3 to 4 times and relaxing ourselves increases the oxygen intake. And why am I saying that? Because this all starts from the brain and just calms us and gives us that moment to pause. Hence, physiological changes are definitely associated with emotions. And like you can see in the slide, there are different areas which get more affected by different emotions. So happiness is all over and sadness is more felt in the legs. You feel weak, you stoop, your body language changes, your head is down, there is low energy. All of that comes with sadness. Similarly, with happiness, there's extra energy. So that is how our body also understands and supports and kind of gives us signals if we are aware about it. So these were two main areas I've spoken about: naming and identifying our emotions, and understanding the physiological changes that go with the emotions so that I can identify it faster and manage myself better. Which brings me to the next slide: the science behind emotions. So, this is a little bit of a very simple theory which I find very interesting and I would like to share with you. I have simplified it completely. So, I have a question. You don't, even if you don't answer in the chat box, I would still like to just put it forth that have you ever done anything or said anything and regretted later? I know I have done that several times. So, have you ever done or said something and regretted later? Or have you, the second question, have you been relieved and you thank yourself, thank God I didn't do that? Have you been relieved that I did not do what I really wanted to do? I did not talk or speak or act the way that in my moment I wanted to do. But in both these cases, why this happened was because of your brain. So, which is the emotion center of our brain? The amygdala, which is as big as a almond, which is as small as almond rather, is the emotion center of our brain. It is located right below near the nape of the neck. So the amygdala is the emotion center of the brain, and the prefrontal cortex is the sensible part of the brain. It is the judgment part, the rational part of the brain. It is the part of the brain that can weigh things, that can understand and process facts and then respond. It is the judgment part. It is the matured part. Now, what happens is that when there's a trigger, and there can be many triggers, something simple like coming out of the bathroom and seeing a wet towel lying on the bed, or it could be loud music, or it could be when someone doesn't answer my phone, or it could be just excessive honking on the roads, it could be tiredness, hungry. Anything can become a trigger. When there's what is a trigger? It's like a hot button being pressed and a release of emotions. And I also want to tell you emotions are chemicals. So there's a release of emotion and the amygdala gets very active. The amygdala gets active. Now, the amygdala acts first and thinks later. So we can safely call it as the most impulsive part of our brain. The cortex part of the brain thinks first and acts later. So let me show you. If Mahatab, can you put me on the main screen? Let me show you. Could you put me? Yes, I would like to be on the screen. Yeah, thank you. So let me show you a very interesting analogy that has been drawn by a very well-known psychologist, Dr. Siegel. He says that this is the brain. I hope you can see it. Yeah. So this is the brain. This is the nape of the neck, and this is how the brain stem, which connects the brain to the entire body. And this is the brain. There are two parts to the brain: the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. These four fingers are the prefrontal cortex, which I just mentioned is the sensible part of the brain. So, in normal circumstances, the prefrontal is awake and alive, and our amygdala is nice and, you know, not very active. Now, here comes a trigger. Someone says something very rude to you, someone cuts you through the lane, or you're just caught in the traffic snarl, as I had mentioned earlier, and among the one of the situations I'd mentioned. So, when a trigger comes, the amygdala gets very active and the prefrontal goes into sleep mode. So, for those few moments, we are in the control of the amygdala and there's a surge of emotion. Now, the good part is that amygdala is much required because the amygdala can sense threat. It can sense, yes, something is not right, and I need to protect myself from this threat. I'll give you a simple example again. Let's say you've gone for a morning walk, and as you're walking and you're on the phone maybe, and you're suddenly accosted by a stray dog, and he is giving you growling and looking at you intensely. Now, imagine if there was no amygdala. you would not feel terrified, and you hate dogs, and it's a stray dog, and you are terrified. Let's say there is no amygdala. You would not feel terrified. You would not feel anything. Now, if you do not feel anything, how are you going to take action? How will you know how to protect yourself from this threat? Hence, emotions are actually data and signals. That's a very important point to remember. Emotions tell us how to function in a particular situation. So, the same way the amygdala gets active, the amygdala senses the threat, and the amygdala prepares the body to face that stimulus. Therefore, we feel a surge of energy. Our hormones get a lot into action, and it all starts from the brain. Now, a lot of times, remember, I just asked you, have you regretted? Yes. So sometimes the amygdala takes over, and um, we immediately get into action. And sometimes those actions are regrettable later. So there are three types of responses: fight, flight, and freeze, depending on the situation. In the situation of the dog, for example, you either would think of picking up a stone to hit the dog, or maybe looking out fervently and wanting to shout out at any other fellow walker, or maybe you would just freeze because you don't know what to do out of fear. So you have three responses broadly: fight, flight, and freeze. Now, while you are doing this and while the amygdala is getting, the prefrontal cortex takes over and now has processed the information and is giving us. Uh, is there anything, Mata?
You can go ahead. You can go ahead.
Okay,
No
fine.
problem.
All right, thank you. Yeah, and the prefrontal cortex takes over and gives a much more rational and a saner response. So therefore, why I'm telling you this is that our emotions come in a burst. If we can, if we can exercise the power of the pause, hold on for a minute, yes, and let the prefrontal cortex take over, we will take far less regrettable actions and choices. That is why I asked you. And there have been times when you almost did something but stopped yourself. What stopped you? The prefrontal cortex stopped you from doing anything what we call rash. And when it was unable to stop you, your amygdala took over and maybe your emotions got the better of you. So, emotional regulation is another very important part of emotional intelligence. So, it has research has shown that when we take that moment and also name our emotions, yes, it also gives us time to come to terms and just put ourselves together and manage our emotions. I hope you enjoyed this little bit about the neuroscience and how managing our prefrontal cortex better. Yes, taking deep breaths, or going away from the stimulus, or or at least finding time to find that pause, like I said. And I think that there is a lot of power in the pause, and it helps us take far more mature decisions and choices. Moving to the next slide. Next slide, please. So I can see the clock ticking by. So just putting this all together, there's a situation or a trigger which leads to a thought. The thought leads to the emotion, and the emotion leads to the behavior. So, when there's a situation like a dog accosting me, and the emotion is of horror, terror, very, very scared, there is something else that happens in the middle, and that is the thought. Only our thoughts happen so fast, and they are so patterned. We are so practiced in our thought that it moves on autopilot. So we miss it a lot of times. In one day, how many thoughts do we generate? There is no research to prove that, but definitely it runs into thousands. We would go mad if we started attending to each thought. So most of the thoughts get filtered out. A few get into our subconscious, and a few thoughts we attend to immediately. So in the situation of the dog, I'd be like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? Suppose he bites me. Why did I come alone? I wish I got my stick. What do I do? And I'm so scared. Yes, all these thoughts come. I think I'm just going to run. I can't stand here and wait for him to attack me. And so the emotion of terror, the thought says I'm going to run, and maybe your behavior that you run. But if your thought is, it's okay, I'm sure he's not going to do anything, I just have to not be nervous because he'll smell my nervousness and I'm going to wait here. If that's your thought, then your behavior will be freeze. You'll just be there and you will not move. So there is no way that, I mean, I wish I could overemphasize the importance of thoughts. Thoughts are very powerful. Thoughts determine our choices and actions, whether in a split second or whether more. And thoughts determine how I'm going to feel about something, as we had our responses earlier. So while the lockdown also generated thoughts of gratitude and happiness and acceptance, there were also thoughts of anxiety, which would lead to certain behaviors. So thoughts are very important, and being mindful of my thoughts, at least in those situations which are troublesome situations where I struggle with my emotions, would be very helpful in getting to be more emotionally intelligent. So let's move to the next slide. And I think, yeah, and that is another very important, another important tool, that when I'm hurt or disturbed by something, how do I say it? Yes, how do I say it? A very powerful way of saying it is I statements. I am upset. I am angry. Instead of saying that you make me angry and you annoy me and you don't treat me well, I feel devalued. I feel disrespected. I don't like being treated like that. I statements are very, very empowering statements. Because when we are saying I statements, I am taking ownership for my emotions. If you remember, I had mentioned earlier that naming and identifying emotions is very important, because that leads me to me taking responsibility for my emotions. I statements does exactly that. So it's a very healthy and positive way to respond, that I'm unhappy or I'm happy because, or when you do this, I feel very cheated or very humiliated. And of course, more challenge comes in the uncomfortable emotions and not in the happier emotions. So can we move to the next slide, please? Yeah. So behaviors which exhibit low emotional intelligence. So there are certain behaviors which I want to bring to your notice, which are everyday behaviors that we see around us, and sometimes we ourselves indulge in them. Blaming. The more I blame others, society, God, misfortune, the less responsibility I'm taking for my actions, deeds, and emotions. Criticizing. Again, judging. Unwilling to ask for help, unwilling to give help, unwilling to say sorry, unwilling to ask for sorry or give sorry, forgiveness, and holding on to that resentment for days, months, and sometimes years together. Yes, which can deeply affect your well-being in a not healthy way, in an unhealthy way. So these were just four I thought would be, just to give you an idea that how are they, we have behaviors which we inadvertently exhibit, which actually leads to low emotional intelligence. So, can we go to the next slide, please? I would like to, as we are nearing our conclusion and nearing to the end of the session and the presentation, not session, but the presentation, Maya Angelou, a very, very well known feminist and very respected educationist and feminist, has made this powerful statement that that I have learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. People will never forget how you made them feel. I think it's a very powerful statement, and I hope it resonates with you. So I think we are coming to the end of the session, and there is a short video, and I think we all would agree that a picture can speak thousand words. So there's a short video, and after that, we could take a few questions. I hope you enjoyed this session, and stay healthy, stay safe, and all the best. I'm sorry, there's no sound for some reason. So, friends, I hope you enjoyed this. You could type in how you found the movie, and as you very well know, what this movie is about and the message it's giving. So, anything, any thoughts on this, do share with us on the chat box. And Pearl, I think you can take over. Thank you so much for being such patient listeners. And now we can continue with the Q&A. Pearl?
I think Pearl is frozen.
Okay.
Just give us a second. On oh no, so Pearl's back. Sorry. Yeah, well, she is frozen. So maybe I could ask you the first question.
Wonderful.
Uh,
Please do, Mata.
because I have been looking at the questions as well. So, a question comes when correcting a person of her change in emotions, the person not feeling the same, always you are right and others are jealous, negative, insecure. How to improve that person?
I'm sorry I didn't get the question properly because it was a little disjointed.
Yes. So, basically, the person's asking that when a person's being corrected, that you're not always right, you're being ridiculed. Is
Yeah, yeah.
how do you improve that kind of person? How do you acknowledge that kind of person?
Okay. So the question is that if someone is doing something wrong and I know he's doing something wrong, how do I correct that person? Right?
Yes, yes,
So the first thing I'd like to say is that we cannot change anyone. The person is doing something and is saying something which is not right, but we have not been given that power to change them until and unless they are ready for it. It really depends a lot on your bond with the person, on your relationship, and how much they're willing to listen to you. Number one. Number two, if you can, like we say as idiomatically, that you can take the horse to the to the pond, but the horse has to drink himself. The same way, you can show the direction, but the person will be willing to change only when they are ready for it. But pushing the person, criticizing the person, etc., will just make things worse. In my opinion, it doesn't help.
right. That's very interesting. We have Pearl back, so Pearl, maybe you could take the questions now.
Yes, sorry for the technical glitch. Yeah. The next question we have is, what are the emotions of a person with high IQ? Sanobar has been asking this. What are the emotions of a person who has a high EQ?
EQ or IQ?
EQ, EQ.
Well, so no, but that's a very good question, because the thing is, emotions are emotions, which I should have mentioned. They are neutral. There are no good or bad emotions. But when the emotions get better of us, then they become bad. For example, uh, love is a very healthy, it's a very positive emotion. But if it changes into possessiveness, it can become unhealthy. Concern is a very positive emotion, but if it is perceived, either it becomes that or is perceived as interference, then it can become an unhealthy emotion. So therefore, what are the emotions in EQ? A person with emotional intelligence say, they are not different, only they understand themselves better, and they are more at par with their emotions and in tune with their emotions. Until you are not in tune with your emotions, you cannot be in tune with others' emotions. Then we are judging or labeling, but not in tune with their emotions.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. The next question we had from Nidhi was, what emotions cause back pain?
Pardon?
What emotions cause back pain?
Back pain.
Yeah.
Now, that's like a whole different study. If you believe in it, I do also. That definitely there is a connection between what we call psychosomatic, psychosomatic disorders. That there is a different connection between body and emotion, body and mind. So, there is no one clear answer that I can give you like that, but I can tell you it is believed that back pain happens. Now, according to Louis Hay, who I also follow her a bit, it's because of either some stress of or some financial stress, or it could be because you feel unloved. So there are different parts of the back which are meant, which are connected to different emotions. If you are interested, Louis Hay Body Mind books, and it's a lot on online also, you can check there. But I can tell you a few, like shoulder ache, migraine, headaches, all these do have connection with feeling burdened, overwhelmed, etc. So you can check it out yourself by reading about on it by Louis Hay.
Okay, thanks, Jayshree. The next question that came up from Dr. Kama, Dr. Shehnaz Kama, was how to make EQ a gender equitable topic. Why so few men become counselors, or a few men even go to counselors to share? You could,
Yeah,
throw some light on
I think it's
how men find it difficult to vent and what could be
this
done
is
about that.
fantastic question, Shanaz. Lovely. And I'm glad you brought it up because I really did want to talk about it, but in the flow, I missed it. So, this is absolutely a culture thing. In our society, I can at least talk of India, if not other countries. What is it that we laud and glorify? We've always said the shoulders of a man, that the man is the breadwinner, the man is responsible for his family, the man has to look after. So from childhood he is being taught that you are the big boss, you'll be the big boss, you are the one who has to keep the flock together. Hence, you have to be strong. Unfortunately, we have understood strong as being aggressive or being macho, and most importantly, as not showing, what I will put in apostrophe, not showing weak emotions. So, being vulnerable was considered weak, unfortunately, a sign of weakness. And that you can imagine the kind of well, havoc is a slightly strong word, but it has played havoc on with many men, is because of this confusion that I want to cry but I can't cry, as simple as that, because then I'm called a sissy, or I'm called ladkiyon jaise rota hai. And I think it isn't something ancient. We still hear that around us. So I really do passionately feel that we have to understand that men are as human as women, and they also have a right to feel their emotions. Yes, it actually, I'd also like to say Brené Brown has a wonderful, she has written a lot about vulnerableness, and she has a wonderful TED talk on it, where she says being vulnerable is not the absence, courage is not the absence of fear, but despite fear, despite feeling vulnerable, you are going ahead, taking your decisions, making choices. So I strongly feel that our men are very caught in this whole thing. And this whole thing of, if you ask them how are you, I'm good. And I have a lot of friends also who are counselors, and they say the same thing, that more and more youngsters go through this issue where they are unable to come to terms with the emotions because they are considered weak emotions, and therefore go through stress in life.
Great, great, ma'am. The next question that has come up from Kishore sir is, what's the difference between IQ and EQ? And how do we, the other question was, how do we actually identify what is our EQ level?
Let me just answer the second part. EQ level, to identify, there are tests. Now, there have been some well designed tests, and if you really want to, even organizations use them a lot, because as we were talking, organizations are highly conscious and mindful of the fact that they want. Because they want people with good EQ, and I'm especially talking of the multinationals and the other, even in the Western world, because there's a direct link between EQ and productivity.
True.
So that was one thing, and there are tests. Now, IQ, what is an IQ test all about? It's about measuring your logical intelligence, your mathematical ability, your reasoning ability. So if you're good in these kind of areas, you have a high IQ. But in case you are not good in it, you have a low IQ. So that immediately labels you as average. EQ is completely different, and there are tests for that, about social intelligence, social awareness, etc. And there are tests on that.
Okay. Any measures where we can improve our EQ? That was one more question. How could we improve our EQ? If we are low
So,
on EQ, for example, how could we
so
improve that?
improve. So that's a little more general question, but I would say that if you want to improve your EQ, you first need to know where you fault, which is
Sure.
that one area that is, there is that one area, that one interaction or something that is bothering you a lot, and to first work on that. Having said that, I would also like to say, and especially for my youngsters, that to improve and to keep up the mental well being, what we also need is something basic, like just doing something that boosts our happy hormones. As you very well know, we have happy hormones like serotonin, oxytocin, and dopamine. So, a simple thing like one act of kindness a day is said to have great impact on our happiness levels. It could be a small act of kindness like thank you or giving helping out a friend. It doesn't have to be big. Second thing, one act of gratitude, to sit and to just feel very grateful about what you have.
Sure.
So, in this whole maze of anxiety and stress and big things, we forget the small blessings we have. Believe me, Pearl, I have also practiced this, and this really makes you feel much better about yourself and your circumstances. Yes.
Thank you, Jayshree ma'am. And coming to the youngsters, one last question from Jiyo Parsi coming up to you is do you think EQ of single children is different from children who have siblings or brought up in a joint family with cousins or with siblings? Do you think their EQ is the same or different, ma'am?
Well, I can't give you really a yes and no answer because there's no research to prove it, and I'm in no position to answer that. But by experience, and we can say that when we are brought up in a joint family or with other siblings, there is so much you learn without having been need to taught. So that's from the child's perspective. The child needs company of his age. Learning how social communication, waiting for your turn, gratification. There are many things, group things, right, which you learn only when you are with others of your age. When you're only with parents are adults. Yes, you become you grow faster, is what is normally believed. Similarly, for parents, it has been it is not true for all, but a lot of times with one child only to focus on, parents also sometimes overdo the parenting bit because they have huge expectations from that one child, and he unfortunately is supposed to and forced to meet it. So I'll just end by saying an only child sometimes in today's world can become a lonely child. So, can we?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jayshree ma'am. And we still have quite a few questions coming up, but because of paucity of time, viewers, I would request all of you to please put in your questions on our email address. That's geoparsi151@gmail.com. And I'm sure we'll get Jayshree ma'am to answer some more questions. I hope I've covered most of the questions, but we really have to end the session now. Thank you so much, Jayshree ma'am, for a wonderful, informative session. And for Geoparsi, please do like us on our Facebook page. Visit our website, geoparsi.org, for more information. We are also on Insta, so please do, follow us on Insta too. Thank you so much, and looking forward to having all of you for the next Friday forum. We'll surely have one more informative and interesting speaker, just like Mrs. Jayshree Mehta. Thank you, ma'am. God bless.
Thank you so much, Pearl. Those were such kind words. But I've also enjoyed this session a lot, and I hope we have connected. And thank you so much, and good day
Thank
to you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.